Hello everyone, welcome in SC300, Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator, second day of this training. My name is Saurabh Srivastava and I am delivering this SC300 training days. Today is day 2 and we'll see what we have in our agenda that we'll cover today. So today we'll start with implement an authentication and access management solution. And here we have some interesting topics. Plan and implement Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication, MFA. Second is implement access management for Azure resources. Third, secure Microsoft Entra ID user with MFA and manage user authentication. These are 4 main topics that we'll cover today. Definitely, we will have some lab activities in homework that you will complete. So let's see what we have in this discussion, and we'll see some demonstrations as well. So first of all, when you complete this day 2 agenda, you will have clear understanding related to configure and manage authentication, including MFA. Then we have implement zero trust using conditional access and other tools. And you will be also understanding how to create and manage identities for use with resources and applications. So these are different kind of understanding that you are going to get after completing whatever the agenda we have today. So let's start with the first one. So this is secure Microsoft Entra users with multi-factor authentication. What we have in this, we'll talk about what kind of Microsoft multi-factor authentication options we have, how we configure this for Entra user, for M365 users, where we can use it, and what different options we have, especially for settings and configurations. We'll talk about all these things here. So first of all, what is Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication? MFA is not a new thing. We are using MFA since many years, and almost with every identity provider, you are using MFA in different form. Like doesn't matter you are using any kind of public identity provider like Google, Apple, Facebook, or if you're using any other third-party solutions where we have identity. So definitely you'll be using multi-factor authentication, like using a kind of another layer of authentication security based on OTP, based on email code or SMS. So we are using this kind of concept, this kind of format since many years. And similar to that, in Microsoft, we have Microsoft Entra MFA. We can also enable multi-factor authentication for my Entra users. Definitely, only ID and password is not sufficient. So when ID and password is not sufficient, we should have another layer of security in our Entra identity. And we can achieve that in extra layer or additional layer of security in authentication using MFA. Definitely with MFA, we get different kind of benefits. First of all, this is more secure than password. Simply using ID and password is not sufficient because ID and password is, you can say, is a very, you can say, attractive target for hackers and attackers. So they target ID and password a lot. And if they get access to that ID and password, they will have access to the applications and data. So if you have another layer of security, another layer of authentication, it would be great. So MFA is definitely more secure than traditional ID and password. In Entra ID, it's quick and easy to set up and manage. We have many options, different places where we can configure these MFA options, MFA settings. So we can enable MFA from Admin Center and admin can enable it for the user, and then we can ask users to register for MFA based on whatever different kind of verification methods they have. I'll talk about what different kind of verification methods we have in MFA. So that would be interesting to see that what we can use, what my users can use. But from Entra ID perspective, this is easy and quickly you can set up in your organization. Definitely, this gives you strong identity verification. We have many options how we can verify our identity in MFA. And these all options are very strong, very secure, and definitely this will be very helpful, very, you can say, secure, helpful, and up to the compliance related to, like, if any company is following any compliance goal, they can achieve that using MFA options. Definitely we get a strong security mechanism, and we have different types of authentication methods that we can use in this MFA, multi-factor authentication. So here, when we talk about MFA, MFA is basically based on three main factors. You can enhance security in authentication by simply deciding or checking if something you know, that is your ID, password, or maybe any kind of OTP, something you possess, that may be any kind of smart card, USB drive where we have the link, where we have the security keys, or certificate based, some kind of certificate if you have authentication. If you have a smartphone where you can use authenticator application. Also, if you have any other authentication method that you can hold, that you can have, this comes under something you possess. And something you are represents if you have any biometric, face scan. These are a very unique verification method that we can use in any MFA option. So MFA can be used using any of these methods like OTP, anything that you have with you, or something you are like you have biometric or face scan, we can use in multi-factor authentication. So how we configure these, how we see where we see these options, authentication options, I'll show you. But first, we can use MFA with conditional access as well. MFA with conditional access means generally, like if any user is trying to access any resource, what happens? Your request will be first transferred or handed over to Entra ID to get user authenticated. And once the user is authenticated, then it will go to the MFA where additional layer of security will be checked. And then after, if you have additional layer where you can decide which resource or services or features should be granted based on signals, that comes under conditional access. So based on the conditions, based on the signals, what we see at user side, we can decide if we want to grant access to our organization or data. So we can combine MFA and conditional access together. So first we'll see how to enable MFA, and then I'll show you how to configure conditional access for any organization. But yeah, these two MFA and conditional access, these two can be used together. You can see here, I can simply create conditional access policy where based on the signal, if this is allowed, access will be allowed. If the signals are blocked, access will be blocked. Or maybe if the signals are something that is in medium severity, so I can present MFA here that please complete the MFA challenge, and then only you'll be able to access your resources, what you're requesting. So this is something that what we see if you're going to use this combination together. So how we configure MFA, let's talk about. We have different kind of options, different kind of places where we can configure this MFA. So this is my Entra ID, not this Entra ID. This is my Entra ID portal. And here you can see, if you want to configure MFA for my user accounts, we see this users tab. I have different users here. If you want to configure MFA for them, we can click on these three dots here on the top right corner, click on per user MFA. And here we can configure MFA options for my user. Let's see what we have. All right, so it's still loading. Let me refresh this page once. Seems like this is struggling. So you can see when you click on per user MFA, you'll see this page. And here you can configure if you want to enable MFA for any user in this organization. For example, I want to enable MFA for Diego and maybe Debra user. How we do it? It's very simple. You can select users and simply click on enable MFA. Definitely, you can provide this URL to your user where they can complete their MFA registration, MFA setup, because this is up to the user which authentication method they want to use in MFA. They want to use authenticator application, they want to use SMS options, they want to use any kind of hardware token, or they want to use any kind of maybe FIDO2 security keys, depends. So this URL we can provide to my user and they can register themselves when this multi-factor authentication is enabled for the user accounts. So simply click on enable. We'll wait for this. And now this is enabled here. You can see for Debra user, it's enabled. For Diego user, it seems like it's not enabled, but this is something that you have to wait for some time. Is any settings in cloud is not instantaneous. Or you have to refresh the page to see a refreshed version of applied settings. So you can refresh this once again. And you can see for Debra and Diego user, these two are enabled. But notice we have some other settings. We have disable MFA. If you want to disable it, we have enforce MFA. So what are these? Let's understand. So basically, when you are going to enable MFA, by default, that would be in a disabled condition. It's a default state, and users are not enrolled in MFA. Now, when we talk about enabled, we are going to enable it. So user is enrolled in MFA, but can still use their password. They can skip the prompt to register if they want. So at every login, this will be prompted, but they can skip. But in case if your organization is looking for like enforcing this MFA registration to everyone, that at after enabling this MFA, in the next login, this should be presented and users should be forced to complete the registration first. We can go for enforced. If user is enrolled in MFA and has either completed their MFA registration or will be forced to complete it, on their next login. It means definitely I have enabled these MFA options here, means these are enrolled, but they have to register themselves. But in this situation, they will see the prompt, but they can close it and they can use their normal login password. But generally companies, they enforce it. And it's very easy. Select the user and simply click on Enforce MFA. So now here in this, what we see, Debra and Diego user, they will have a status enforced. But once again, I need to refresh this one. And you can see it now. Debra and Diego user. These two are presenting the status enforced. So in this way, we have these options, how we can enable MFA. We have other settings that you can see here in user MFA settings. Like here requires selected user to provide contact methods again. Delete all existing app password generated by the selected user. Restore multi-factor authentication on all remembered devices. Something like that. Or let me remove this selection. And you can see you will not see this option highlighted. So you have to select the user and then you have to configure these settings. Apart from that, we get some more settings in service settings option here. Just loading, let's wait for this. So here you see for app password, it says allow users to create app password to sign in to non-browser applications, or you can simply configure do not allow if you want. You can also configure trusted IP. You can enter the IP address, and from this IP address, multi-factor authentication request will be skipped. Also, you can configure allow user to remember multi-factor authentication on devices they trust. So you can configure here for how many days user can trust the devices for. So these are some settings that we use in general in organizations. So you can find it here under service settings. Also, you can see bulk update on the top. Definitely selecting user manually one by one and then enabling MFA for them is not easy option. So we can click on bulk update. We can download a template. Generally, this template is in CSV file, and that CSV file is like mainly containing two columns. One is for the user UPN name, and the second column is the status of the MFA enabled or disabled. So you can go for configuring that template. You can add the user details there, and then you can upload here to enable MFA in one go for number of users. So this is something that what we see in this per user MFA setting in Entra ID page. But the same settings we can find in one another place as well. And that is Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So here again, if I click on Users tab, Active Users, you can see this is reflecting the same user list, what we are seeing in Entra ID, because I'm using the same tenant and admin ID here. So I'm seeing the same list. And to enable MFA from here, I can simply click on multi-factor authentication, and this will open the same page what we were seeing here in Entra ID. Let me click on this. And you can see I am coming to the same page that we're using to enable or disable user MFA. So this is something interesting that in both cases, you see the same page. Doesn't matter, you are going to open MFA from here, or you are going to open MFA from this place. But definitely, if you want to learn more about it, you can click on multi-factor authentication deployment guide. This is a kind of web link, and you can read about more on this, how to deploy MFA in any organization. So here we enable MFA in this way. But we have other options. What are the other options? Let's talk about. We can use MFA, or we can enforce MFA for my user accounts using conditional access. Or you can say you can use MFA in conditional access. Conditional access comes under identity protection here. And we click on risk-based conditional access here on this. So let's see what we have in this. First of all, conditional access is designed for granting access based on different types of signals, what we detect from user, what we detect from device, what we detect from location. So there are many signals that we detect, and based on that, we can grant or deny the access of resources, applications. For example, in your organization, you have 3 locations: US, UK, and Australia, and you want to enable your resource access, your application access only from these locations. You want, if somebody is trying to access your applications or data from any other place, that request should be blocked. Now, this is a kind of condition where location is only 3, that is US, UK, and Australia, and you want to block other locations. What about if you want to allow access only from a specific IP address range? What about you want to allow access only if user is in, we can say, if the user is not involved in any kind of risky activity, or user account is not in risk? What about you want to allow access only in case when your device, the device what you're using, that is related to, or that is holding a very specific type of operating system like Windows 11, and you want to block all other operating systems? So there are different conditions what we see here in conditional access. So what we do, we create new policy, and here we configure policy according to our requirement. So for example, if I create a policy like maybe Mac OS blocked, or maybe Mac devices blocked. For example, my company wants to enable access only by using Windows device. Let me talk about Mac and Linux devices blocked. I want to block Mac and Linux devices. Like if you are using Mac and Linux devices, you can't access something what I'm going to configure here. So this is my policy. Then we have to select user, where you want to apply this policy. Select. You can apply this to all user in company, or you can go for selected user. You can select guest or external user, or you can select directory roles, or you can select a specific user and groups. So for example, if you click on users and groups, I can select users like maybe Alex, or maybe any user, Christy, maybe Debra user, Diego. I'm selecting users, or I can select group as well, like executive, security group for executive, security group for engineering, depends where I want to apply this conditional access. I can select them. Definitely, if you're going to select all user, then you can go for exclusions as well. Okay, so we have exclude option here. Now next is target resource. Target resource means what you are going to block or allow. Now here we are in the resources tab, like resources options we have. We can go for user actions and we can go for authentication context as well. Especially for applications, you can go for none, all resources, or maybe all cloud applications are selected. In selected, you can select which kind of application you want to add in this policy. So for example, I want to maybe block Office 365. Maybe I want to block Box. I want to block maybe Microsoft own applications like maybe admin services, or maybe I want to block Teams as well. So you can see Microsoft Teams channel services. So it depends what different applications you want to add in the scope. So you can select. Then after we go for network configuration, here we add, if you want to add any kind of location, any network or location allowed, trusted network or locations, selected network and locations. So basically adding the IP addresses or locations you can add here in this network option. A condition defines what signal you want to detect. The signal is related to if the user is at risk. If you click on this, it says, please select in, like, especially at what level of risk this condition will be applied. At low level, medium and high, only medium and high, or only an high condition. Depends. Also, if you want to configure sign-in risk, you can go for sign-in risk option. If sign-in activity is at risk, that you can again select here. No risk, low, medium, and high, and you want to target this one. If user activity is risky, so this will be detected under insider risk detection. And if user is in, performing some internal risky activities, in this case, I can go for this insider risk as well. If the user activity, risk activity is in a minor case, moderate or elevated, accordingly, I can apply this policy. Device platform, which device platform you want to allow or block. Because I'm creating policy here that is Mac and Linux devices blocked, so definitely I will target Mac and Linux devices. I can click here. You can go for any device or selected platform. I want to include iOS, Linux, Mac OS. Android is also kind of Linux platform. I want to enable Windows Phone and Windows only. Done. Again, you can select locations here if you want. Previously, this network option, it was not there, so we were adding the location here, and you can see the same options we have. So it's up to you. You want to add this location here or here, both are the same thing. Or you can go for client applications signal here. So basically this client application is related to if you are using any kind of browser, mobile applications, a desktop client, Exchange Active Sync you are using, or other clients. So based on this signal, policy will be applied. Now you can filter for devices. Suppose you want to target specific devices in your organization. So we can add this dynamic rule to filter my devices in my organization, and to this list, if the list is matching to these kind of devices list, then policy will be applied. And yes, we have authentication flows that we use for the advanced options. So here we are selecting the condition, and according to my rule, I'm creating this policy here where I'm including Linux, Android, iOS, and Mac devices. Then finally, when you go for grant, in grant you decide if you want to grant access with some conditions or you want to block the access. Depends. If you want to block access, wonderful, no problem. But if you want to grant access, you can decide if you want to add more verification in this. Like for example, if like there should be authentication strength, and here you can see multi-factor, the combination of a strong password and multi-factor will be used. Or you can simply go for enabling multi-factor authentication. If MFA is not there for a user who is requesting, in this case, access will not be granted on these devices. Also, we have device to be marked as compliant. When you add any device in Intune or in ID, we create compliance policy. And if devices are not following that compliance policy, that device will be marked as non-compliant. So I can definitely go for grant access when devices are compliant. If devices are not compliant, in this case, access will be denied. Also, we have other options like require Microsoft Entra, hybrid joint devices, also require approved client applications, require app protection policy, require password change. These are different settings that what we see here. But because I'm creating a policy where I want to block these devices, I will go for block access simply. But as I was talking about MFA and conditional access, these two can be used together. So here we have these options where multi-factor authentication can be introduced inside this conditional access policy. Now, you select that block access. Then we have some session control options here. Basically, this is for, this option is for an adding this conditional access setting with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and many other settings related to persistent browser sessions, sign-in frequency. These are for some more control. So you can select which one is good for you. And now here, you can enable policy in 3 different ways. You can keep the policy off. Maybe you want to enable it later in a change window. You can click on report only here. Policy will not actually deny something or allow some, basically allow is already there. It's not going to deny something, but this will only generate the report if there's any matching pattern. But when you enable on, any restrictions will be applied. So simply go for on and create, and policy will be created. So you can combine MFA with conditional access. But let me create this one here. But here we're talking about enabling MFA from this multi-factor authentication and enabling MFA from this Entra ID place. Conditional access is not only using MFA to allow access, but using conditional access, I can enable MFA for my organization. I can enable enrollment. For this one, we go for new policy from template. And here we configure, you can see, require multi-factor authentication for all user. I can configure this. I can use this template. Or I can use this one, require multi-factor authentication for admins from here. So also you can see some more here, require multi-factor authentication for Azure management. So these are some kind of multi-factor authentication related templates that we can use directly, and we can enable enrollment of MFA just simply using the policy. But apart from that, we have one more place where we can use MFA registration policy. That option comes under identity protection and in dashboard. You can see here, multi-factor authentication registration policy. By default, this is applied to all user, not enabled, but we can enable. For all user, I can enable require Microsoft Entra ID multi-factor authentication registration. I can go for selected user. I can go for all user, depending on my need. I can see is already selected. I can simply enable it. So this will enable registration enforcement for all the selected user here. So you have different ways. You can go to the Entra ID and users tab. There you can go for per user MFA enrollment options and then ask user to register themselves. You can go to M365, go for MFA here. This will open the same page. Here, what you see in MFA. You can also use conditional access policy, not only to use MFA for further layer of verification, but also you can use conditional access template to enable MFA for your users, for your admins. And also in this identity protection dashboard, using multi-factor authentication registration policy, I can enable these registration options for my all user or for my selected users. Depends. So these are different options what we see in MFA, how to enable it, and from where different places you can find these kind of configuration options. So this is interesting, this is something, I can say is very helpful. Different places we have for different purpose. Now, so if you go for next, what we see in this. So we can enable MFA in different ways, and these are different options that we're talking about. Let's move ahead. So if you are going to consider MFA, you're going to enable it in different scenarios. There are some kind of prerequisite that we have to have in place. For example, if you're going to enable cloud MFA, like enabling MFA in Entra ID, for that, do I need any additional setup? Answer is no. We don't need any additional setup. But definitely, if you are going to configure hybrid identity, like if you are in on-prem, you have on-prem environment where you have Active Directory domain service, and then you are going to sync that Active Directory environment to your Entra ID, you are in a hybrid setup. So if you want to enable MFA to provide MFA capabilities to your on-prem accounts, on-prem identities, in that case, using Entra Connect tool, synchronization must be deployed between on-prem Active Directory system to Entra ID. If synchronization is not there, or federation is not there, you can't use MFA in this hybrid identity model. Also think about you have some legacy application. Legacy applications is like you have some kind of applications in your on-prem Active Directory environment, and these are legacy applications. These are not the modern applications with modern kind of authentication or MFA and many other options. So if you want to enable MFA for legacy applications, what you can do? You can go for Microsoft Intra Application Proxy option. We can deploy Microsoft Intra Application Proxy, and then you can publish or you can present your application via this. Using this option, definitely your users who are accessing these applications, they can get MFA capability. This is something that we need if we are going to enable any on-prem legacy application with MFA options. Also, We can use Microsoft Entra MFA with radius authentication. So if you want to use MFA with radius authentication, for that we have to configure a network policy server, NPS. Then only we can use Entra MFA with our radius authentication options. So these are different options, different kind of requirements in infra if we are going to use MFA in different places, in cloud, in hybrid, in maybe along with legacy applications, and using MFA with radius server. So these are different kind of considerations. Now let's talk about planning MFA in intra environment. Plan your multi-factor authentication deployment. What we have in this, what kind of options we see, what kind of configuration options we see, we'll talk about. So when we talk about deployment consideration, there are many things that we have to keep in mind. First of all, get employee buy-in. You should have a proper communication in your organization, communicating to your employees, to your user, to a stakeholder, that you are planning for MFA. You are planning to enable this in our organization. So posters, emails, and other different kind of news information channels, maybe SharePoint sites, newsletters. This will help you to communicate properly to all the stakeholders who are going to be affected with MFA. Also, you should consider rolling out MFA in waves in multi-phase environment. Because if you're going to enable MFA in one go for everyone in your organization, and if you are facing problem, you're facing challenge with MFA, so this will be affecting to your entire organization user. That's why when we talk about these kind of security features, we enable these kind of features in waves. It means first we enable MFA for the pilot group of the users. If they are providing good feedback, then we move ahead with maybe IT team. If IT team feedback is good, then we go for selecting some users or employees where they have less impact on the business. We enable MFA for them. And if everything goes well, then we move ahead to the serious users or maybe senior authorities or managers where we enable MFA for them. But in all these, a proper communication plan is very important. Without communication plan, enabling these features in your organization will generate a panic situation. Maybe users are joining office on Monday and they are seeing a prompt that please complete your MFA registration. You have not communicated well. So till Friday, they were using ID and password. And on Monday, they are seeing a prompt. They will be in a panic situation. Why this new prompt is there? Because I was able to log into my application and services using my ID and password very well till last Friday. So communication plan is very important. That will not only include that what is the timeline where we are going to deploy this, but also KB articles, help and support URLs in case users are facing challenges where they can connect. These all information should be there in your communication plan. Now, you can also tie your MFA rollout with conditional access compliance. So maybe for a specific device, working locations, applications, or data access, we can configure if MFA is required for these different kind of signals or not. So we can combine MFA with conditional access policy. Definitely, we have to select our authentication methods as well, which I want to use with Microsoft MFA, because there are many. We can configure which all authentication method I want to use that user can configure for their MFA option. You have to also plan for MFA registration. See, enabling MFA for user from Entra ID page from M365 is not sufficient because that is the enrollment process. You are enrolling user for MFA. Then after, user needs to perform MFA registration activity. And that registration activity will be completed by your employees, your user, depending on what kind of authentication methods they have. By default, we get two authentication methods during the registration. The one is Authenticator app, and the second is mobile devices, like where you can receive the SMS. So Authenticator and mobile device. But yes, we have other options as well that we can use as MFA, or you can say you can use as authentication method. Also, add on-premises system after MFA is established. So in case of any kind of hybrid model, when MFA is there in Intro ID, if you were to use this in your on-prem environment, you can disable on-prem system for hybrid connectivity. These all are different kind of consideration if you want to enable MFA for your organization. Now, what next we have in this? Let's see. So MFA supports different kind of authentication methods. Mobile app verification using Authenticator app, call to a phone number, and text messages to a phone. SMS will be delivered to your phone number, what you have configured, and you can use that for the MFA purpose. So these are different options that we see. And definitely, if you want to perform some activities in related to this MFA, so we have a GitHub exercise, GitHub lab exercise here that you can complete. So for this one, what we have, you can see here, I can go to SC300, GitHub. You can click on the first link. And here, under instructions and labs, we have these different kind of lab instructions are there. You notice this one, enable Azure AD multi-factor authentication. This is one of the lab related to MFA. Definitely, you can complete all these different kind of lab activities, but this is something that is related to the MFA option. Definitely for this, you should have your own trial account with you, or if you have received any lab, any hands-on lab from your learning provider or from Microsoft, so you can use that lab to perform these activities. So definitely you can plan for this kind of lab activities, and there are many as well. Now let's see how to configure multi-factor authentication methods. What we see in this. So here, when we talk about, there are many authentication methods when deploying MFA. These all authentication methods you can see under authentication methods option. You can find this here. If I go to Entra ID, and if you go to authentication methods tab, you can see here we have different kind of authentication methods are there. Video to Microsoft Authenticator, SMS, temporary access pass, hardware, OAuth token. Something is in preview that would be related to the support and help. Software OAuth tokens, voice call, email OTP, certificate-based authentication, and QR code. These are different kind of authentication methods. So let's talk about Authenticator app. You know very well. Authenticator app is something that is available for Android and iOS for both. and you can download this Authenticator app and you can register your account there. Once account is registered, Authenticator app will provide you a push notification to approve or reject the login, or also you will get a kind of 6-digit code generated for every added account. So you can use that code to authenticate yourself when there is any kind of MFA activity. So you can find this Authenticator app to all the places in Google Play Store and Apple Store if you want to use this with Android devices and with your Apple devices. So Microsoft Authenticator. And you can see here, this is for Google Play Store. This is for App Store. And you can see. So basically, this gives you this kind of push notification here. You can approve or deny. Or if you don't want to go for this, you can go for seeing a 6-digit code generated for every added account here. This will be regenerated after every 30 seconds. So definitely we have security here. Now, so these kind of options we have from Google Play Store, and you can use this on Android devices. And yes, for Apple devices, this is compatible to iPhone, iPad, and Apple Vision as well. So these are different things that what we have, like different kind of authenticated options we have for Google Play Store and Apple Store. Definitely we have Windows Hello for Business, where we have this is available in your devices. You can use PIN number, you can use biometric, you can use face scan. These are all things you can use in Windows Hello for Business, also using the fingerprint reader. Apart from this, we can use FIDO2 security keys. FIDO2 means, basically FIDO2 stands for Fast Identity Online version 2. And what are these? Basically, this is kind of standard. And this standard is being used by different kind of companies who are manufacturing devices. One of the very famous companies, Ubico. And you see this kind of devices here, like this kind of devices, where we have USB support, Type-C, Thunderbolt, Lightning port, and many other. These devices are containing secret keys. So if you plug these devices to your laptop and other devices, this will be completing the MFA for your account. This also comes with NFC, fingerprint reader, and many other options we have. So it's something like if you are going to use this, like this one is a kind of key only. This one is with fingerprint reader, and we will have other options as well. So FIDO2, like this one is fingerprint reader here with this Ubico device. So you can decide which one is good for you, and you can accordingly use this option. Then we have OAuth hardware token. If you're using any hardware token or software token that comes in open authentication, like if you talk about this, also FIDO2 is a kind of OAuth hardware token. So something like these kind of tokens, you can say Safe ID, these kind of hardware token we have. Then we have software tokens as well. So these kind of tokens we use for the multi-factor authentication. SMS and voice call is also there. So you can configure, we can disable or enable these options, what we can use in my authentication method from here. Let me show you. From this place, under authentication methods, we have this authentication method here. and we can decide which one I want to enable. For example, I want to enable video 2. I can click on this. I can enable it. If I want to enable it for my all user or selected groups, it's up to you. In this way, we configure these settings. So we have many different methods. Also, we have some supplemental authentication options, like security questions for non-admins only, email addresses for SSPR, app passwords for legacy applications where MFA support is not there. So these are different settings that we can use for additional layer of verification or security. Now, moving to the next. So this is the page that is a kind of registration page for a user. If user is enrolled for any MFA, and now admin is informing that we have enrolled you for MFA, please configure your MFA settings, your MFA registration. So user will see this kind of page when he will go for first login, or you are going to configure or complete these kind of registration options. So you'll see options that what you want to use. You want to use authentication phone, or maybe mobile phone for SMS and call. You can verify, you can select region, and you can complete the MFA registration here. So this is a look and feel what we see from the user side during the registration process. Also, we have a very good place to monitor these kind of adoption. What kind of adoption you have in your organization, which kind of authentication methods are being used in your organization. These all things you see here in this monitoring adoption place. You can find this here under authentication method tab, and here under monitoring, you can see this activity. So here in authentication method, if I click on activity, I can see a report related to this kind of authentication method option. Right now, you can see I don't have any kind of multi-factor authentication options enabled out of my 36 users. But I can see more detail in usage. You notice here I have 12 single factor authentication login that I'm using with this admin account. Mostly password is being used, no SMS, no mobile, no alt mobile, no office phone, no auth code, no passkey that we use in Fido 2. So different kind of options we have here, but only this is being used right now that you can see, and other informations. So this will be well populated when you have more methods are being used in this Microsoft MFA configurations. So this will help you to understand how that option is. Like mobile is there, Microsoft Authenticator app is there, software token is there. So you can use this to understand which methods are being used a lot. So these informations, usage detail, you see here in registration and usage page. Now, what next we have? Let's see. So we have some reference resources. These are for some more understanding, to read about what we have in Entra multi-factor authentication deployment and what we have in self-service password reset. Basically, self-service password reset is a kind of capability that we can grant our users, employees, to reset their own password. And we get this under password option, password configuration options, where we can configure this SSPR. So just for understanding, SSPR is a feature that is by default off, but you can enable this where user can reset their own password without sending any request to admin to reset the password on the user behalf. So definitely this we can enable, and this will be helpful in many organizations. Now let's talk about manage user authentication. What we have in this? Let's see. So in manage user authentication, we are moving from password-based authentication to the password-less authentication. So from password-based to password-less. Password-based authentication or only ID and password is not good because hackers, attackers, they can easily target these kind of passwords and accounts, and they can use different methods to breach the account ID and password and gain the access. But if you are going to use password and SMS or voice call, so this will give you some good security. But still SMS and call can be manipulated. That's why this is in good condition, not in the better. Because in better, this says, okay, use authenticator app, use software token, or use hardware token if possible. For better and more security. But in passwordless, that is the best. Authenticator app, Windows Hello for Business, Fido to security keys, certificate-based authentication. These are best option, and these are known as password-less authentication methods. So we are moving from password to password-less design, and this is, password-less is very secure in comparison to other previous options. Now, so when we talk about password or authentication method strength and security on 4 different kind of metrics like convenient, high security, inconvenient, and low security. If you talk about passwordless, that is high in security and also convenient to use. That's why people are moving towards passwordless. But when we talk about password, and here, if you talk about the simple password options, password is sometimes not very convenient, okay, and also low in security. So generally, we should avoid in modern age, we should avoid only using password for any kind of data security. We should avoid this. So for a balanced one, you can go for password plus two-factor authentication. It's good for security, high security, but this is inconvenient because you have to enter the password, then wait for the code, or using different kind of authenticator applications. So that would be a bit inconvenient, but this is definitely high in security. So these are different options, different thing that what we see in authentication method is strength and security. Now, so here we have some good exercises related to this. We have one exercise related to configure authentication session control. There you will be creating this under the conditional access policy. Yes, definitely we have a lab activity related to this in GitHub that you can configure. You can complete that to have more understanding on this. Also, we have another lab that is related to enable sign-in risk policy. Now, what comes in sign-in risk policy? Let's understand this first, then it will make more sense. So when we talk about Entra ID, Entra ID gives you lots of capabilities in this. But question is, because Entra ID is maintaining my identities, do we have any security options for my identity? How my identities in Entra ID is secure against any kind of attack pattern from hacker or attacker? So by default, we have, like, if we know that we have different kind of Entra ID plans. So if you talk about free plan and the P1 license, premium 1 license, in this case, we have a kind of you can say up to the level security options that will protect your identity. We call it security defaults. You find this here if you go to Entra ID, Overview tab, and Properties tab. And if you scroll down, you can see security defaults. So security default is something where you are getting this by default if you are using free license in Intro ID or you are using the P1 license. Security default gives you up to the level, you can say security control or the algo in the backend, and this will be protecting your identity. But this is not best in class. For best in class, what we have, Microsoft recommend use P2 license in Intro ID. When you use P2 license, you will get one advanced identity protection feature. We call it intra identity protection. Because here I'm using P2 license, I have intra identity protection already there under this identity protection. If I click on dashboard, so this dashboard represents intra identity protection feature that we get in P2 license. Now question is, what is this? First of all, this is the advanced version of security default. And here, this is a kind of monitoring place. This monitors your user, your identity behavior. This monitors what kind of risks are involved in that user identity. So basically this generates reports for risky user, risky workload identities, risky sign-ins, and risk detection. What kind of risk has been detected? So these reports are there. Now what you can do, you can take actions on it. If you have some risky user, some risky workload, identities are there, risky sign-ins are there, you can take actions. But taking action manually is something we can say not very logical. Because what if you have repeated activities for user risk or sign-in risk, are you going to take actions manually every time? So in this case, what we have option for policies. I can create user risk policy and sign-in risk policy. In user risk policy, I can target all user or selected user if I like to. And I can select the risk, which risk I want to target. Maybe I want to target low and above, medium and above, or high. If you talk about medium and above, so high will be included. If you talk about low and above, low, medium, and high will be included in this. So it's up to you if you want to target all these, keep this selected, and then control. If user is in low, medium, and high risk, block the access of the user or allow access, but ask user to change their password first. This is something that we can see here in user risk policy. I can click on this, enable it, and save. So I can create this policy in advance. If any low, medium, and high risk user risk is detected, this will block the user, or maybe this will ask user to change the password first. Similar kind of policy we have available here in sign-in risk. Now, if user sign-in activity is in risk, in this case, definitely I can target all user here or selected user depending on the need. Then we can go for sign-in risk, low and above, medium and above, high. And here I can, because this is related to sign-in activity, I can either block the user and then, or we can go for allow access, but user should complete the MFA challenge. If not, then user access will not be provided. So these kind of options we have in identity protection. But this is interesting to know that this identity protection generates reports here for risky user, risky workload identity, risky sign-ins, and risk detections based on more than 15 plus algos or 15 plus situations. These are like if user is traveling or any kind of unfamiliar location has been detected, any kind of atypical travel is detected, user is logging more than expected behavior every day, you are using a Tor browser, or maybe you are trying to use any IP address to log into Entra ID, where that IP address is performing some risky behavior. There are many different kind of algo in the backend. They check many things, and based on that, they give you that what kind of risky user, sign-in risk, workload identity risk, and risk detections we have. You as admin, you can just only create these kind of policies here based on the user risk level, and this will behave accordingly. So these options we have in this identity protection. And here in this lab, you are going to perform a sign-in risk policy options here. How to enable sign-in risk policy, especially for identity protection. So once again, it's a premium feature. This comes under P2 license of Entra ID, and we use this to protect our identity in Entra ID. We have one more exercise here that is related to enabling multi-factor authentication registration policy that every user should register to MFA in my organization. I can enable this using the same page in identity protection here, and that is multi-factor authentication registration policy. This one. I can enable this for all user, enable it and save, or maybe you can go for selected users and groups. So this is something that is interesting that we have these options here, and you can see these activities in lab. You perform these activities there. Now what next we have? Now when we talk about monitor, investigate, and remediate elevated risky user, think about in a situation you find some risky users. In this case, what you will do? What kind of options we have? How you can check the user risks? Let's see. So first of all, you see the risk reports. These risk reports are there in risky sign-ins. Here you can check if we have any risky sign-in the list. We can definitely use different filters here. You can download the report. And if any kind of risk is detected, definitely along with my policy that will be blocked, or definitely you can see different options here you have. You can click on this. You can confirm sign-in is compromised, confirm sign-in is safe, dismiss sign-in risk. Many different kind of options you have to deal with what is detected. In case of risk detections, you can check here what risk has been detected. For risky user, you can see what different kind of users are in the risk, and you can also see different controls on the top. That is confirm user is compromised, confirm user is safe, dismiss user risk. These are different options that we can see, and we can configure these kind of status change for my user depending on how this is being detected. So different options we have. We get this risky sign-in under the risky sign-in options in the report under this identity protection. So you can get these informations like you can say different kind of, I believe, if I look into this, so now you can see basic info, risk info, device info, MFA info, conditional access. These all informations will be available here in this. Now, also if you go for risky user, once again, actually these reports are available in other places as well. Like in security, you can find this report as well. But this also listed here in identity protection, risky user. And you get these options like confirm user compromise, dismiss user, reset password, block user. So if you have entries here, you will have more options, more features that you can configure in this. Now, we have definitely different kind of activities that we use for different kind of, you can say, control. Administrator will have different options like self-remediation with risk policies. Automatically, this will be remediating. Our admin can reset the password manually for the risky user, dismiss user risk, close individual risk detections manually. There are different options that you can use here. Confirm user compromise, dismiss user risk, reset password, block user. These are different kind of options here. So admin can perform different activities here to monitor the reports and act accordingly. Now, definitely for this, we have different kind of links, reference link that you can use for, understanding. We have conditional access for workloads, require MFA for all users, and Defender for identity. Now, question is, what is Defender for identity? So, because we're talking about this identity protection here, we know that we have this identity protection for Entra ID. Looks good, not a problem. But when we are working in hybrid model where we have on-prem Active Directory domain service, what kind of identity protection we have for my on-prem Active Directory? Do we have any default security for my on-prem Active Directory identities? Answer is no. We don't have any kind of default option there in my on-prem Active Directory. So in this case, what we have, how we can protect our on-prem Active Directory. So to protect your on-prem directory, we have a feature, we have a kind of Defender service, we call it Defender for Identity. Now, Defender for Identity is a kind of cloud tool where we install sensor in our on-prem Active Directory environment or on-prem ADFS server. Because these two servers, ADFS and on-prem Active Directory, these are involved in identity processing. So that's why we install sensor related to Defender for Identity to these two servers. And we register these sensors to Defender for Identity. So when anybody is going to send attack internally to your Active Directory system or to ADFS, sensor will detect that behavior and sends you update about any attack pattern. So we can go for basically adding the sensor, and then we can detect what kind of behavior we have in, what kind of attack patterns we have in for Active Directory and for ADFS system. So how actually this looks like, just for understanding, if you search for Defender for Identity, so I just want to show some image here, especially this one. So you can see in this one, basically it's a kind of Defender for Identity is a kind of cloud tool where we install sensor, MDI sensor, Microsoft Defender for Identity sensor to your domain controller, to your ADFS system. We register this here, and this will be keep scanning all the traffic, what is coming to us to this domain controller, and sending this signal to Defender for Identity. This will be analyzed, and you can see what kind of challenges we have. Basically, you can find these sensors here. If you go to M365 Admin Center, and if you go to Security tab, the security is Microsoft Defender XDR portal. Let me show you where you can find these options. Still loading. So basically, this option is related to Defender for Identity here. If you click on dashboard, you see this is reflecting, right now we don't have any kind of sensor here. That's why it's not reflecting data properly. So what we need to do, we go to the settings tab here in system, settings tab. And here we go to identities tab. This may take maybe a minute. Let's wait for this. Hmm. So this is taking some time. So once this will be ready, I'll show you from where you can download the sensor. So mainly what happens here is Defender for Identity is good for protecting your on-prem Active Directory and ADFS system where we have identity related processings. Because by default in on-prem, where you install Active Directory in Windows Server, we don't have any kind of default security option. We don't have any kind of sensor, we don't have any kind of detector that can detect what kind of attack patterns we are seeing for my Active Directory system. So this is something that what we see in Defender for Identity, and here you're going to see this link. Basically, you can follow this link to read more about this. And yeah, I believe this may take some time. Okay. So this is something that what we have now. What next? We have implement access management for Azure resources. Now for this, we have different kind of basically objective, and many of the objective we have already completed in our previous discussions. So here, Azure roles, custom roles, we have already completed. Role permissions we have completed. Keyword policies and access objects, this will be in your homework activity. So here we discuss about what we have in managed identity and access Azure resources with managed identity. So first of all, we'll talk about what we have in managed identity here. So let's see. Meanwhile, let me check. Okay, this is still preparing. So basically what it's doing, this is preparing a kind of workspace where all the data will be stored related to all the processing, all the Defender components, everything. So once this will be ready, then you will have all the options to configure it. Because here we don't have only Defender for Identity, but we have other options. This is for Defender for Identity. This is for Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, Defender for Cloud Apps. Sentinel is also included here. These are different options that we see. Yeah. Meanwhile, let's talk about what we have in managed identity. So in managed identity, it's a very specific kind of identity option in Intro ID. So what we have here, why we use it, let's talk about. Okay. So first of all, question is why we need managed identity. So basically, managed identity is a kind of option that we use in Entra ID, if you want to provide any kind of access, like if I want to present any identity to my any resource and they are willing to access any service or application, we can use manage identity. For example, I have one application. That application is accessing any storage account in your Azure environment. How we can present storage to my application? Maybe I need to add my ID and password as a human user ID and password to that application, and then using that ID and password, which is allowed to access storage, application will be using my credential to access the storage in the process. But in this case, I have to expose my ID and password to the application. What if in case I can go for creating a kind of identity that is I can attach to my application directly, and application can access to the storage using that identity. For that identity, admins are not responsible for any kind of rotation, any kind of management. In the backend, Azure will be taking care of all the security controls for that identity. So this is something known as managed identity. So instead of using user account or any service principal, we can create managed identity while creating the resources. You can see this is creating a kind of storage account. So they can assign access to the managed identity. Now there are two types of managed identity. One is system assigned, and the second is user assigned. It's very simple to understand. If any managed identity is tightly connected to a resource that is known as service, you can say identity, or basically system assigned, you can say system assigned identity. System assigned managed identity is something when this will be deleted, along with that identity will be also deleted, what you are creating here. But if you have user assigned identity under managed identity, so user assigned identity I can use this with many different kind of services and resources. So it's up to you. If you have a requirement that you want to delete the managed identity along with the resource, use system assigned identity. And if you want to keep the managed identity available for other purpose, even after deleting the resource, you should go for the user assigned identity option under managed identity. Now in Azure infrastructure, we use this a lot. We use this to applications, resources, or even we can add this in my automation scripts that we can present access. So in this case, manual admin interaction is not needed. We can present identity to our resources, and they will be able to use that identity to access other services and applications. So this looks interesting that we have this kind of approach, this kind of capability in Microsoft environment where we can use it. But interesting thing is, you get this option like creating managed identity only when you are going to create resources. There you can use this option, or definitely PowerShell you can use. But if we talk about this Entra ID place here, in Entra ID, you'll not see option for creating the managed identity, because managed identities are specifically related to the resources. So that goes under your Azure infrastructure where you have subscription and you have options for creating resources. So this is something that comes under managed identity concept. Now what next we have in this? Let's see. So we have some links here. These links are mainly related to going for Azure RBAC, create an update, Azure custom role, manage identities, assign and manage identity access to the resources using Azure portal, also understand Azure role definitions, Azure RBAC, Key Vault, and create an access secret in Key Vault. Just for understanding what is Key Vault, Key Vault is a safe place where we keep our secrets safe, like ID and password, credentials, or certificates. We can keep these stuff safe in Key Vault. And because Key Vault is a safe place, I can grant access to my user, to my services, if they want to access Key Vault and they want to get information about what kind of secrets or other informations are saved there. So Key Vault is a good place to keep your secrets safe, and that we can attach to different kind of processes, different kind of activities. For example, I am a developer. I'm developing any application I want. Whenever I want to use any service or application, I have to present one credential, set of credential. So in this case, as developer, either I will be embedding that ID and password in my application code, or I can configure my application in a way that whenever application is looking for any resource or service access, application will connect with Key Vault, get a token based on what kind of secrets are there, and that token will be submitted to the service or applications what my application is going to access. It's again a kind of managed identity design. Key Vault gives you this capability where we can store our credentials, secrets, and certificate in Key Vault, and this can be accessed based on the request basis. And we can configure access policies that who can access Key Vault, at what level of access of Key Vault will be available. Is like maybe I want to enable any kind of Key Vault access to some users only for the read label, not for any modification label. Or even I can configure in a key, in a field, which all information will be available. For example, in one key, I have, or one secret, I have 10 informations. I want to only present 2 informations when anybody is going to access. I can configure this in my Key Vault access policy. So definitely Key Vault we can create, but for that you should have a valid subscription in Azure because this is a resource. So you can create this resource and you can use it for your, different kind of keeping the secret safe, keeping the information safe for that kind of purpose. Now, apart from this, we have some hands-on lab activities. This is for homework. So you will perform some lab activities related to configure Azure AD MFA authentication registration policy, enable sign-in risk policy, manage Azure AD smart lockout values, configure authentication session control, and registering an application, grant tenant-wide admin consent to an application. Basically, this lab is part of the next discussion that we complete in day 3. But yeah, we have these kind of labs available in GitHub. And also, this will be listed if you have received any kind of hands-on lab environment from your provider. So definitely, we have these kind of options in homework, different kind of labs are there. So the more you complete, learning, the more you explore in MS Learn, you complete the labs, you will have more understanding what we're talking about in this different discussions. Now, meanwhile, if we go back to this here, you can check my Defender portal here. Defender for identity is properly loaded. So you can see we have add sensor option. So we can click on add sensor and we can download the installer for my ADDS system, for my ADFS system. And once this is installed to my Active Directory system or ADFS system, while registration process, we use this key, access key, to register my sensor to this Defender for identity. And once it's installed, it's configured well, Then we will have these informations listed here in dashboard. Definitely, there will be lots of data when you have sensor configured, and if sensor is collecting informations from your Active Directory system and NAFS environment. So we get different options. We get different kind of settings, different kind of components here. And just for understanding, we have different kind of components like Defender for Office 365. This is good for email and attachment security. Cloud apps we have. This is your CASB, Cloud Application Security Broker. We'll talk about this one in our next discussion. And yeah, this is a CASB in Microsoft that we can use for controlling applications, behavior, also detecting the malicious behavior in application. We can prevent it. So different capabilities, different kind of options we see here in this. Now, what next? So different kind of capabilities we see. So Entra ID comes with different options, different kind of components, different kind of features that we're talking about, especially the MFA, how we can configure conditional access with MFA options, what comes in identity protection, what comes in managed identity. These are different topics that we were covering here. So definitely, you can complete the homework, that is the hands-on activities, and also keep exploring what you have in MS Learn. So here I suggest you can go to SC300 exam page, click on this Microsoft Certified Identity and Access Administrator Associate. And if you scroll down, you see exam informations for sure. But also you see prepare for the exam. This prepare for the exam includes all the different kind of, you can say, topics that we are covering in our these sessions, because some topics we are covering, something is in your homework activities. So to see a complete list of topics and discussions, you can click on, like if you are going for this one, first one, you can see we have different topics here. So I suggest you can go for, completing these kind of topics here. Like if you go for implement an identity management solution, you can see here we have implement initial configuration, create and configure manage identities, external identity, hybrid identity. These are different options, these different topics that you can explore and can read more about it. So if you want to prepare for exam, this will be the very helpful place to read about different topics and different informations you can see here. Also, you will have different kind of options, like in case maybe you want to go for practice some questions here. So you have a practice assessment here. You get 50 questions from Microsoft that you can test and try. You can check your knowledge. And also, if you want to summarize everything in SC300 before the actual exam, you can go for this SC300 prep videos. You can click on watch video here. And I believe, yeah, there are 4 video series. This is the first one. Then we have second, third, and fourth. So you can use this to summarize your all these SC300 learning before the exam. So definitely, I'll talk about more about exam preparation on very last day, because we have exam prep session. But definitely, you can go for MS Learn page, SC300. Once again, I'll like to show you SC300 exam. Go for the first link, and here you see this prepare for the exam. Different topics are listed there. So you can use this for your preparation, for your, you can say, knowledge, and for if you're interested to have more idea, to more understanding, go for it. So here we have lab activities that we're talking about. You can complete this as homework. So far we have completed these 4 topics today. We completed plan and implement Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication, what we have in authentication options, how we can configure authentication from Entra ID place, from M365, what comes in enabling the enrollment, what comes in enforce enrollment, what kind of registration options we have, how MFA is going to work with conditional access options, how we can combine these together, or if you want to enable my all user MFA enrollment or admin enrollment, do we have any kind of dedicated template that we can use in conditional access to enable these options? Also for registration, we have MFA registration options under the identity, Microsoft identity protection page. These all things we're seeing there. We also discussed about what kind of managed identity options we have, where we can get the reports related to MFA, what kind of authentication options we have. If you want to enable or disable any authentication method, how we can do it. So we are definitely talking about lots of things. We have completed different kind of discussions moving around these all topics. So you can explore more on this. You can go for MS Learn pages, read more on this, and prepare yourself for exam preparation, exam things if you're planning. So this is something that what I have planned for this day 2 agenda. And definitely, I don't have anything else. So you can definitely explore more and keep learning, keep exploring the things in SE 300. So have a nice rest of the day. And don't forget to join our next session where we talk about more interesting topics. So once again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you all in our next session. Thank you.
Technology is moving fast. Closing the skills gap can help your team optimize and stay focused on what's ahead, rather than constantly playing tech catch-up. That's why it's important to keep Microsoft certifications active. Here's everything you need to know about renewing your team's certifications. We have introduced a free certification renewal process for role-based and specialty certifications to help you stay current with skills you need to remain up to date in your job role. Please note that the fundamentals certifications do not expire. In order to renew, you don't need to schedule and take an exam through Pearson VUE. Assessments are shorter than the exam. We encourage you to renew early, as soon as you are eligible. You won't lose time by renewing early, as the extension date is not based on the date that you choose to renew, but 1 year from certification expiration date. To access renewal assessment, you need to connect your certification profile to your Microsoft Learn profile only the first time. Once connected, you don't need to repeat this step in future to access renewal assessments. You can take the assessment as many times as you need. But after the second try, you will need to wait at least 24 hours before your next attempt. Embracing a growth mindset and the need for continuous learning can help you optimize and successfully perform in job roles. With a renewed Microsoft certification, globally recognized and industry-endorsed evidence of mastered real-world skills, you will also be able to demonstrate your proficiency in keeping pace with technology,